In this lesson, we will talk about nonverbal language, emotional display rules, and the science of lie detection. Make sure you prepare for the lie activity in class tomorrow. First of all, we'll talk a little bit about emotional expression. Emotions, of course, as we've discussed, are something you feel. They may involve cognitive processing or perhaps just physiological arousal. But part of what we are interested in about emotions is how are emotions expressed. And people typically express emotions to other people using their face, their body, and their voice. One of the questions psychologists and anthropologists are interested in is nonverbal language of emotion universal? In other words, do people always have the same look on their face, the same way of holding their body, or the same way of, say, raising or lowering their voice to express the same emotions? If we look at these pictures, you should be able to probably identify what emotion the people are feeling. In fact, when culturally diverse people were shown basic facial expressions, most people did pretty well at recognizing what the other person was showing. Our display rules are also pretty similar, and that means what kind of emotion is it acceptable for you to show. Think about a case where a person perhaps might be fearful, but they know they're not supposed to show fear. Maybe they're going to give a speech to a large audience, and it's important for their job, and so you wouldn't want people to see that you might be afraid. So the display rule in that context would be to not show fear. Okay, for some people would say, for example, boys shouldn't cry. So a display rule would be that when boys feel sad, they need to mask their feelings. Emotional display rules are pretty similar across cultures, although in some cultures, you're supposed to be much more guarded with your emotions. You wouldn't want to show them in public. That's more typical, say, like in Japan or some other Eastern cultures, to try to keep your emotions more private, whereas Western cultures tend to put emotions more on display. All right, let's look at these facial expressions. These are all facial expressions of children, and they are also pretty universal. It doesn't necessarily determine whether it's heredity or environment, but children's facial expressions seem to be pretty much the same whether the child is born in rural Guatemala, in urban South Africa, in the United States, London, Tokyo, or wherever. So let's look at these for a moment and see if you can identify each one of them, and then I will show you the answers. I'm sure you got this first one. This particular child is expressing joy, okay, or happiness. And we can see that because the mouth is forming a smile, cheeks are lifted, and there's a twinkle in her eye. I bet you got the second one too. Look at the eyebrows, look at the jawline, right? This is anger, brows drawn together and downward, eyes fixed, mouth squared off and pointing down. What do you think this third one is? Interest is what they would say. Curiosity might be another way of putting it. The brows are raised and knitted. The mouth is slightly softly rounded. Lips might be pursed. Okay, this child doesn't look very happy, right? Okay, in this case, this would be disgust, and that is actually a very universal look. The nose is wrinkled, scrunched up, upper lip is raised, tongue is pushed outward. What about this one? This is a little harder. A little more subtle. This one is surprise, and we could probably do a caricature and have a better look at surprise, but this is surprise on a little girl's face. Her eyebrows are raised, her eyes are wide, and her mouth is rounded. I bet you do know this one. This one is pretty universal and pretty easy to see. Sadness. Brow's inner corner is raised, the corners of the mouth are drawn down. There's not the anger brows, right, but there is the frown. And the last one here would be fear, right? The brows are level, drawn in and up. Eyelids are lifted, mouth corners are retracted. So when you do Psych Sim, you'll get a chance to see if you can identify a lot of different facial expressions by just those particular elements, primarily the mouth, the brows, the jaw, and the eyes. Here's an example of a study that was done in 2012, okay, to see whether individuals looking just at facial expressions could tell which of these pictures of tennis players are victory and which ones are someone who's just experienced a defeat. Take a minute and write down your answers. Victory or defeat? Okay, pause if you need more time. Here are the answers. 1, 4, and 6 are all somebody who lost a point. 2, 3, and 5 are all winning points. Most people actually cannot tell that clearly if you can't see other things like the person's demeanor, if you can't hear their voice. People are not that good at picking out just facial expressions. All right, aside from simply facial expressions, we express our emotions through nonverbal language. So an averted glance might mean I'm deferential to you or I'm afraid of you. A firm handshake conveys I'm proud, I'm feeling confident. Okay, raised inner eyebrows, a question. Hunched shoulders. Okay, leaning back in a chair, dominance. Okay, all of these things are things that we read in other people, and a lot of times we do so unconsciously. We pick up on something from another person and we don't even think about what emotion it is they're trying to show. Research has shown, interestingly enough, and probably not surprising, that introverts are actually better at reading other people, and extroverts are easier to read. So if you're an extrovert, you might not be as good at picking up on the signals other people are sending, but the introverts around you are pretty good at picking up on yours. One other interesting feature here is that people automatically imitate other people's facial expressions, gestures, and posture. And this, they think, is adaptive in that it helps people build relationships. It builds human communities. It's kind of like the mirror neuron piece, right? Mirror neurons helping us to see what another person is doing, put ourselves in their shoes. When someone comes up to you and smiles, for milliseconds, you will mimic their smile and perhaps not even realize you're doing so, which could, of course, be part of the reason why emotions seem to be contagious. Women, also, like introverts, are better at discerning nonverbal emotions than men. Women are much more likely to comment, also, to say, it seems you're feeling sad, and a male might say, what? You didn't say anything. So when shown sad, happy, and scary film clips, women are much more likely to express emotions and to have those mirror neurons than men. Why do we have this? Darwin said that it was adaptive, that nonverbal facial expressions led to our ancestors' survival, helped them to work together, helped them to understand each other, helped them to perceive what other people were doing, and improved communication, even in prelingual societies. So with all of this, how good are we at actually determining when people are faking their emotions, when people are lying, when people are smiling but they're not happy? In fact, it's actually pretty difficult for most of us. We're not actually very good at it. Law enforcement officers and psychiatrists, psychologists will be trained in this, trying to pick up on the slightest bit of a change in the person's facial features when they're faking an emotion. This example, which one's the genuine smile? Okay, if you haven't already seen this in the book, you may not know. The genuine smile is the one on the left, and that's because the person's entire face is engaged in the smile. You can tell by the crinkling around the eyes, the cheeks. The person on the right, their lips are upturned, okay, but the whole face doesn't look happy. Okay, so that you might pick up on that as being a fake smile. So how can we pick up on liars? Well, no one's really sure. Some people claim that they know when someone else is lying, but in fact, some liars don't do any of these things because lying doesn't make them nervous, right? Like a person who is pathological, a person who's a psychopath or antisocial personality disorder, they wouldn't necessarily even react to lying, right? They wouldn't consider it something wrong, so they wouldn't be nervous about doing it, so they wouldn't have the physiological response. But for the purpose of tomorrow's activity, we'll look a little bit here what these tip-offs are, what these clues are. People who are sweating and fidgety, avoiding eye contact, okay, dilated pupils, and higher pitched voice, okay, can be signs that a person is under stress and that might be lying. A pause, thinking through their answer before they say it. Ironically enough, saying honest or honestly or I'm telling you the truth can be a clue that somebody's not. And then micro-expressions, and if you Google micro-expressions, you can find some videos online that show, freeze a frame and show a person's face sort of grimacing or looking stressed out right before they smile and tell a lie. You should, of course, beware your confirmation bias because when you actually do catch somebody lying, then you think, see, I can always catch liars. But in fact, many times you don't notice and somebody's lying to you. And so most of us are no better than 50-50. You can, obviously in the textbook, it talks a little bit about polygraph, and there's, on Psych Sim, there is a lesson if you want to look at it on a polygraph. The polygraph is something that police officers, some want to use, some dismiss this as sort of pseudoscience, but it's not admissible in court. So sometimes it's used by police officers to try to detect whether somebody's lying. And what they do is the polygraph machine records changes in breathing, cardiovascular activity, and perspiration. And so they'll interview someone and ask neutral questions like, where do you live? How old are you? What's your favorite movie? Then ask control questions that you know that they are going to get stressed out about, for example. And then critical questions, which are the ones, where were you the night of January 15th or something, to be able to detect whether the person is lying in response to those questions. And tomorrow in class, we will follow up with some lie detection activities and then move on to fear, anger, happiness, and general adaptation syndrome.